All right. Well, welcome back to Generation, Bridging the Gap with the Rex.
And Diva.
And we're going to have some fun today. We always have fun.
Lots
We're
of
always
exciting things. So
excited.
exciting.
So excited. We used to say, "Pot stoked and excited."
Oof.
Have you ever heard that?
I think all of them.
Really?
Okay.
Okay. I know. We don't even use it anymore. But it used to be a big hit. Everybody asked, "What's the matter?" And I'm pot stoked and excited. Fired up.
That's lit
Yeah,
now.
I used to say, but somebody would go, "Hey man, what's happening?" I'd go, "Baby, I'm firedup.com." And then I'm like, maybe you better look up what it says on firedup.com. Because it was during the .com boom, so everybody wanted to use .com in a clever
Oh, it's the
way.
bomb.com. Yeah.
Yes.
Ugh.
So yeah, that's dangerous when you quote a website and you think it doesn't exist.
Well,
And then
nowadays it probably
it
does.
probably does.
Maybe
So,
not back then, but
yes. So anyway, all of that good stuff. We're excited. The topic today, we're going to talk a little bit about COVID.
yeah, and how it changed our lives.
Yeah. And what your memories are. This ought to be cool because
Yeah.
you were in the 7th grade,
I was.
midway through 7th
No,
grade.
so funny story about
Okay.
this is also if you hear Dakota barking, she's not excited. This is the perfect time to want to go outside. But in 7th grade, I had just had my tonsils removed. So I was out for 2 weeks and I was supposed to go back after 2 weeks, but then I ran a fever for a week straight after. So I had already been out of school for 3 weeks. I had been back in school 4 days before we were supposed to go on vacation for spring break. And then March 13th, 2020 hit and all of our vacations got canceled because of COVID. And I had already missed 3 weeks of school before COVID hit. So
Yeah.
that's
So
fun fact.
it was kind of
And
wild.
my teachers had not given me any of the makeup work. So when we were required to start doing classes, I had no idea what we were doing.
Actually, I always forget that part that you had your tonsils
Yep.
taken out right before that. You had already missed a lot of school. But what I do remember is that your spring break was that week
We were
that
literally
everything got closed down.
Packing for Disneyland, like getting our suitcases down, packing for Disneyland when we got the call that said, so Disneyland's closing. And so then we were going to book a cruise.
Yep.
And then we were like in the payment process of a cruise. And
And the website
so-
went blank.
yep.
And we're like, okay, that we're like, it's shutting down. And we were kind of shocked.
Yeah.
But anyway, it
A little
was
confused too.
yeah,
We
it
had
was-
this trip planned.
Yeah, it was
So-
spring break, and we had planned to go. We normally are Disney fans. We like to go to Disney World, but we had planned this big trip to Disneyland in
to see
California. And
Marvel and
yeah.
all that.
Yeah, that's right. We were going to go see
Yep.
the Marvel campus.
Yeah. But
And
I'm
so
excited because Pixar is my favorite. I'm excited that this summer we'll get to see Pixar Fest going on at Disneyland.
Yeah,
But
so
that's not important.
4 years later, we
Yeah.
have picked that trip up. But yeah, that's not important. What we really want to talk about is our memories of COVID and how it actually changed
because
our life.
How old was I in 2020? If I was born I was 14.
13.
13.
You're 17 now.
Yeah,
So
13.
you would have been
Because I had
13.
just turned 15 when we moved, and that was
Mhm.
a year and a half after COVID.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yep.
I was 13 when COVID hit. So I literally, the start of my teenage years was spent in quarantine.
Yeah, and that's another thing that we're going to talk about in an episode is about how generations are defined by the major events that
Yeah.
happen in their lifetime. There's several different things that will occur that tend to form your,
Mhm.
that people call it your
Hey,
cohort,
Dakota.
your generational cohort. And so just like Paul, the defining moment for his generation was World War II and the Depression. Most of those 18-year-olds that went off to World War II, they actually had been born during the Depression. And so those are two major historic events that just impacted their life, kind of brought them together. It kind of formed, again, a lot of their generational values. And so you and I were talking about mine. And I think my generation has had several, but when you peel the onion back, I think the planes hitting the Twin Towers.
But you were already
9/11.
what? How old were you then?
That was
01.
2001. Yeah, so I was 41 years old.
Wow.
But the thing about it, I remember your mother called me. I was on the road headed to
Hi,
Troy.
Dakota.
I was teaching Army ROTC at Troy University, and your mom called me and said, "You need to get to a television as quickly as possible." And I'm like, "What's up?" She said, planes just impacted the Twin Towers in New York.
She
And
was
I'm like,
working at a
what?
daycare when that happened, or
Daycare?
a child care center or something. She told me.
I don't think she ever worked at a daycare.
Oh,
You're kind of freaking
I,
me out a little
I
bit.
don't know. She was working somewhere with
Yeah.
kids.
Well, you have to ask her about that. I don't
I
remember
don't know. I'll
any
go
of
ask.
she because she was working for the medical billing company for
Not then.
really?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, you have to ask her about
Maybe I
that.
don't know. Maybe that was a different
Totally.
moment.
The red pill or the blue pill? How far down the rabbit trail do you want to go? Back to COVID
Yeah.
and the generational things or the defining moments in a generation. That was one that defined me, and I will never forget. I got to Troy University and I went straight to the radio television building, and there were students and faculty gathered around all the TVs that they had on the wall in the studio. And I just couldn't believe it, man. I walked in and it was crazy. So, anyway, for you at 13, there's this
COVID.
thing called COVID. And
Yep.
tell me what you remember about it, besides the fact that our vacation got canceled. What are
Well,
some of your memories about it?
at first, it just, because originally spring break was just extended a week. So our school had already closed down my 5th grade year for 2 weeks because of the flu season. Because in 2018, there was a really, really bad flu season the year prior. They had shut the entire school down for a month because of lice. And so for me, it was just like it's just a lot of people are sick right now, and we'll be back to school in 2 or 3 weeks. But then it just kept coming, and they kept extending it, and so then it was shut down for the whole year. And so for me, with both you working on staff for so long at the church and Mama being heavily involved with that, it was the first time I had y'all back constantly in my life since I was like 5. Since I had started school, this was the first time that I had spent a day of the week with y'all, and I wasn't sick during the school year. And so that was really big to get my parents back during that season and not having to be at the church 24/7 all the time. So it was, I think, if anything, this sounds awful because I know that COVID was very hard on a lot of people, but COVID was the best thing that could have happened to our life. I feel like that's when we got the job offer. That's when we, kind of realized our priorities as a family. And yes, obviously it was a traumatic experience for a lot of people, but as somebody who only got it once, and it gave me my parents back. So
Yeah, that's an interesting twist to
Yeah.
that. And I love the way that you're putting that. COVID was really tough for a lot of people for a
Yep.
lot of reasons. But as with anything, there were a lot of positives.
Yep.
There were a lot of negatives. And so I'm going to give you the first negative. I'll give you a negative and a positive. The first negative that I remember is, everybody's tuned into the news, whether they're getting it off television or whether they're getting it online. Everybody is just scanning for a news source, trying to figure out what the latest story is. And people are starting to die from this.
Yep.
And that's, the numbers are starting to creep up every day. And I remember thinking, okay, exactly how bad is this? And people were freaking out a little
Yep.
bit. And, I remember, because you don't know. Can you get it just by breathing it? We're
Do you
walking around
remember
it.
the people who walked around with the hoodies and the pot? Because before we all had masks,
Mhm.
it was it was the toilet paper fights, it was the hand sanitizer fights, the bread and the milk fights. People couldn't get their masks, but
Right.
also people would strip in the garage
Yeah.
before coming in because we were told that it could transmit through through clothes. We were very protective of our dogs because we were told that it could come through your dogs and your cats.
Yep. It was
freaky.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think people had their own individual levels of crazy, so to speak.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were one of those because we kept our offices open at the church.
Yep.
And so I was still going into the office. There wasn't a lot of people moving around, but we
Well, it
just
was
felt
nice
like
that y'all could work from home a lot of the time too.
we could
but-
work from home. But my point
Yep.
is, if you let me
Yep.
finish.
Sorry, I get
I'm
excited.
I'm messing with you a little bit. When I would come home after going to the office, Mom was trying to figure it out. Hey,
Mhm.
how bad is this? So she said, hey, can you drop your clothes in the garage? And I'm like, yeah, that's no problem. And I also remember I would go get the mail and I would bring the mail from the mailbox in, but I would sit it on a box in the garage and I would just let it sit about 4 or 5 days before I took the
Lysol
mail.
it,
Yep, I Lysoled the mail because I'm like, I don't know
Cloroxing
what
your
this is.
groceries.
Yeah, we did that. We Clorox wrote. We're like, we are flipping out because nobody knows how bad this thing
Mm-hmm.
is. Nobody knows how you can get it. And I remember I like to run. So, I'm like, man, this is awesome. I get plenty of workout time. But in the neighborhood, I would be running down the street and you could see people literally switch sides of the street, whether they were walking or running, but they just didn't want to go by you like on a normal day. So they completely get on the other side of the street. And I'm
We didn't
like,
have sidewalks in our
yeah.
neighborhood, so
And
it's
you're
like,
like, what is happening?
yep,
And again, how bad is this? And how do you even get it?
yeah,
So that was my negative memory.
yep.
Okay. What you got?
I think so many people have blocked out exactly what COVID was like because you say these things and I'm like, whoa, like this is not a daily thought for me. Like obviously I think about COVID a lot just because it completely changed our lifestyle. I mean, we don't live where we are. We live where we are now because of the changes COVID made. But it was just like the 6 feet apart. We watched a ton of movies then. We played games. We probably ate the best we ever have. I have a distinct memory of when life picked back up again, but I was still, because I chose to stay virtual through 8th grade, even though the school year started back normal, because COVID really only lasted, because I mean, we went to Disney in June or July. So like COVID, like
Yeah,
everybody,
but you had to wear masks
yes,
though,
but
remember? Yeah.
quarantine, a lot of people think quarantine lasted a year, but it didn't even last 6 months. Like, I mean, people were still very cautious after 6 months, but we were really only home until midway through the summer before life started picking back up again. Like I mean, if Disney World was open in June, then you know that some aspect of it, the life was back to normality. But I just remember a very distinct memory of the end of the year when y'all were both back at work. But obviously hours had changed. We were still very cautious about everything. We would get food delivery service, not like where we would prep the meals, and we were watching WandaVision every single week. And so that was where I started cooking meals a lot, was because we didn't want to buy groceries, so we started doing like the equivalent of like the HelloFresh or something.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I would cook meals and I would watch the WandaVision episode first so I could understand all of it, and then we would watch it together as a family. Um, after eating the food I made, and then I could explain it to y'all because there was a lot going on. In all those shows.
WandaVision was a little out there. Come on.
No,
You
I just like
gotta
Marvel shows.
admit.
But we talked about this. I don't know if the episode's out yet or not because we're pre-recording some. But we talked about our favorite movies, and I said my favorite Marvel. Like I love Marvel up into No Way Home, and so like all of those TV shows that came out during COVID, COVID hurt the movie theaters, but I think we got some of our best like television shows. But something else that COVID did was it killed our attention spans because we were always on technology. We were always doing something, and got so bored that we were seeking for things to do. And it's why at least my generation has terrible attention spans, because TikTok got really big then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everybody was scrolling. You were scrolling. Well, those 30 to 90-second videos, it destroyed our attention. I mean, my attention span's completely awful now. Like I can't sit and watch a whole movie without either fidgeting or needing to be working on something else, or like it's just, I'm telling you. And so COVID
I'm loving it. Hey, can you say that again?
shot my
That
attention
whole
span.
thing you just said. Can you say that again?
Oh,
About it ruined your attention
it
span.
ruined my attention span. Yeah. I mean, but it ruined all of ours. Like
okay.
people have a hard time focusing on we were talking about this in another. I'm calling back to episodes we pre-recorded, but we talked about an episode of things we say and how my generation has shortened our vocabulary. Like
Yeah.
how yours, you would say long sayings when something happened, and now ours is just like, oh, insert random word that we've adopted in our vocabulary because we don't have the attention span to listen to long conversations. Teachers have had to adapt the way they teach because kids don't have the attention span to sit there and listen to a lecture the entire time. And that is one benefit and one downfall at the same time. Because of the benefit, it means that there's no longer like super long things going on, like meetings that don't need to be happening because nobody wants to be there. But it also has made it harder for people to be invested and engaged in conversations or movies or things like that because we don't have that attention span.
Totally
so
agree.
I think it's, what is the word when it's fat? It's made the workforce, like the working world, move faster because people don't have the attention span to focus on things for as long, and so they have to get through it quicker. But it's hurt the way we engage with others.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you can't
And that COVID was the cause.
part of the cause. We talked about that
Yeah.
in another episode, but social media
It
the
blew up.
phones, the way that our neurons and our brain are wired,
Mhm.
talked about all of that. So COVID impacted that. But again, we got negatives and positives
Yep.
out of it. One of the positives that I remember the very first night, we sat out. We mentioned this in a previous
Yeah,
episode, but
we
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 sat
don't know when
out.
this coming out. We just have a
Yeah,
bunch
but
pre-recorded
under the dining, we had a
with
little
the
dining area.
chandeliers. What
Yeah,
chandelier? No,
I was like,
yes.
"What are you talking about?" But yeah, now they got to go listen to their other episode. But
When
anyway,
it
I
comes
just
out.
remember how cool that
Yep.
was that we were just out there together,
Mhm.
and there was no rush to get to work the next day. We were
Mm-mm.
doing work by Zoom, we were doing phone calls, and so there was no rush to get into the office per
Mhm.
se, which to your point, you're like, wow, you felt like you got your parents
Mhm.
back to a large degree. And so it was just this very calming effect where we were out on the back porch. We ate dinner together. It was very slow,
Mhm.
easy, calm. And then we played board games
Yep.
out on the table.
Catan,
And
Ticket to
man,
Ride,
Catan,
cards.
that's where I really actually enjoy
It
Catan,
is a
but
fun game.
it is a fun game. But that's where we
Yeah,
started, was during
but
COVID.
I feel like primarily too is I've always had a very close relationship with you and Mama. Like y'all have always been some of my closest friends, but when COVID, when we were always together, we obviously learned like, oh, so and so's busy or so and so has no social battery and just wants to sit and read a book. And it it is really why I can say that y'all are my best friends now, is because I spent so much time with y'all that like everything I did, I told y'all. Like y'all, we did everything together. And some kids would absolutely despise that. I think some kids sat in their room the entirety of COVID. But for me, it gave me a better relationship with y'all. And that's why I think COVID is the reason you and I can do this podcast, is because it forced us to have to talk to each other because there was so much going on in the world. My education wasn't doing the best because none of the teachers were prepared for teaching online. And so I learned a lot during COVID because you sat there and told it to me, and we talked about money and finances and how the world's processing these things and everything. And so I think COVID is the reason we can even have conversations like this on the podcast. But and I have to say it, COVID was a very bad time for a lot of people, but in my personal experience, it was one of the best things that happened to me. And that's not the same thing for everybody. And
Yeah,
I don't want you to think I'm being insensitive by saying that it was the best
absolutely.
thing. But
I
I'm just
think
saying
it's
from my
great.
experience,
Yep.
it was great for me.
I think it's so good. We never want to minimize anyone's situation because somebody, we could have a guest on the show and they could give us the exact opposite story, how it wrecked their family.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've always got to be sensitive to that. But I love your observation. And that's kind of cool. You think mom and dad are your best friend. I
It's
love it.
true.
I love
I
it. It
tell
is
everybody
true.
that.
We
People are
spend a
like,
lot
"How
of
was your
time.
relationship with your parents?" I'm like, "Oh, they're my best friends. I mean, I've been hanging out with Mama since like 11
I
today, and it's
know.
like 5 o'clock.
You guys, I had to go do some things, but you guys just had a great day
We went
hanging out.
shopping.
But hey, check this out,
Yep,
which is really wild in itself because you're not a big shopper,
I'm not.
but you kind of had a good day. Anyway, hey, you know what? One of my other favorite memories was during COVID,
What?
talking about being together. I would, because we obviously churches were prohibited. I don't want to say that. I don't think there was ever a legal mandate that you couldn't meet.
Yeah,
But we were just
there was a
trying,
pastor
was
who got
there?
arrested in Arizona for meeting services because they weren't.
Yeah, I remember that, but I don't think there was a legal mandate that was passed. I think, and again, we'd have to go back and
Yeah.
research that. That's not the point.
Oh,
The point is, our church finally decided, hey, we can't meet in person because we do want to keep people's health and safety to the forefront. And so we made the decision, hey, let's just suspend in-person services. But hey, here's the positive out of that, which there's two things.
mm-hmm,
Number one, I remember we lived kind of up on a hill,
mm-hmm.
Emerald Mountain, and I would go down. They had a clubhouse in our neighborhood and it had this great big
Yep,
overlook.
the
Remember
overlook.
that big porch?
Yep.
And I would go listen to Sunday morning service out in the overlook because I just enjoyed being outside, being in nature, just getting a view of the whole city, and then listening to the service. Then I would come back to the house. And you remember we would ride up to the Lake Martin area,
Mm-hmm.
and there are some gorgeous views.
Yep.
And what it reminded me
And good
of,
restaurants. That's
yeah,
where we found a lot of the stores
yeah.
we like
And
and
some of
friends.
the restaurants you couldn't go in,
Yep.
but you could sit in the parking lot, call them, put your
And
order
we
in.
drove the truck around so much then because we would pull the truck bed down and sit in the back of the truck and eat dinner. And
We
it was
would.
just so amazing. And we would meet friends
Yep.
and we would sit in the back of our cars and eat dinner together.
Yep. It was awesome. And
Yep.
then one of the other positives that came out of COVID for me as a church, we used to always say, hey, you can't do small groups online. Small groups are a face to face activity. You have to be together, you have to be looking in someone's eyeballs. And so we had just always had that perspective. Well, COVID comes along and it's like, well, if you're going to do small groups, guess what? You got to do Zoom. And so I was really hesitant about that at first. And I thought, man, I just don't know if this is going to work. But the point is, if that's your only option, you better make it work. And
Mhm.
we got really good at doing Zoom online small groups where you had to really get good at inviting people into the conversation, asking open-ended
Yep.
questions. And I really feel like I got proficient is the word. I
Yes.
got
You
proficient.
mastered the art
I
of talking on
mastered.
Zoom.
Yes, I
It's just
did.
so funny that that was so foreign to us in 2020, and now in 2021, y'all enrolled me into a school that is completely based off of Zoom classes.
Yeah. And so I think it's helped
Yeah,
you in that regard
has.
for sure.
It has. It was
And your Zoom classes, in all honesty, they are so interesting that sometimes I hear your instructors and I hear the questions that the other students are asking that I come sit down
Yep.
next to you. And I'm like, what
we
are you
sit
guys
on so
talking
many
about
of y'all.
today?
Y'all sit on so many of my classes, and y'all are like, huh? And then we talk about them after, or I'll talk about something, and they'll be like, huh? And I'll be like, hold on, let me just pull up the lecture, and we'll listen to the part of the lecture I'm trying to reference, and I love it, and it's very unique, and I think that COVID, that wouldn't have been possible. We wouldn't have even understood that, and a lot of like the school has grown tremendously since COVID because I think a lot of people adjusted to that and then found out it worked for them. That's how I found out I could be homeschooled, was because of COVID. I found out I learned better through that environment because of being online
Yeah.
for school.
And so, you got any other negatives, positives that come to mind? I've got a couple of maybe lessons learned as we've kind of sat here and talked through this that I remember. So let me kind of throw that
I
out and
have
see what your reaction is to it. But go
a
ahead.
lot of the friends I had in COVID, I don't even talk to now because you were just friends with whoever. And it was very interesting because I stayed virtual with one other person while the rest of my class went back to in person the year and get the same education they are. And so I completely lost contact with almost all of my classmates, and the ones that I stayed in contact with did. As soon as I left that school freshman year, it was a fantastic school, but I'm not in contact with any of them anymore because I didn't like keep that relationship with it. And so that was a very interesting is almost every single friend I made during COVID, I am no longer friends with now. Just because that it was that a different environment. It was a different time. We're in different seasons of our life. We both want different things from it. But it was just a very interesting thing. Is it was some of the best friendships I've had. I could not have asked for better friendships during that time. But it
It was a
it was
season.
it was a season. It
Yeah.
was all the friendships I made during that season were there for that season only.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Just because you have a season that comes and goes or a friendship in that season that comes and go, it doesn't mean that you may not come back to that person somewhere down the
Yeah.
road through whatever it is, through secondary education,
Work.
vacation, whatever it is,
Yeah.
So
But it was just a very interesting.
yeah, that is.
Yeah.
That is. All right, here's a couple of observations I have. One of the business terms that came out of COVID was pivot. You got to learn how to pivot,
Yep.
especially when your business all of a sudden maybe changed a little bit. But you have to be resilient.
Yep.
You have to bounce back when things are not quite like they have been, for
Yep.
the previous years leading up to whatever challenge has been
You
presented
forget
to
how many
you.
businesses didn't make it through COVID too.
Yeah, though we had some favorite restaurants that didn't make it.
Yep.
And so
R.I.P. JJ.
but here's the thing that I was just thinking about as we're talking about pluses, minus, negatives, positives. Any challenge in life, we have to find a way to overcome that obstacle. And so I think during COVID, all of us, we learned lessons as a country, we learned lessons as the world. So, some people could argue, well, maybe we didn't learn everything we should have. Well, we'll see, because there will be another
'Cause we still don't-
pandemic.
Well, fun fact about another pandemic. I don't know if y'all knew this history fact, and y'all probably did, but there has been a pandemic every 100 years in the 20th year of the century for like 7 centuries. So like the Black Plague started in the 20s. The Spanish flu started in the 20s. COVID started in the 20s. It was just a very
Yeah,
interesting
I
fun fact.
remember you looking that up.
I
That
thought
is
that's
an
like,
interesting
if you
fact.
look back in history, and I've wrote my thesis on this, on how history repeats itself, and if you don't learn from it. And even though that was a very unintentional fact of history repeating itself, there have been like 7 pandemics that have happened. Smallpox was one of them, but they all started in the year 20 something, like 1720, 1820, 1920, 2020. It was just very interesting.
Yeah, kind of wild.
Yep.
So, yeah, fun fact. And again, I think we can wrap this episode up again with the general thought. Always, regardless of what challenge is presented, hey, look for the wins. Look for the way to navigate the obstacle, to overcome the obstacle, to pivot, to be resilient, all of those types of things. And I think we did that as a family. I think we did that as a culture. And again, we're still learning lessons. I know there's a lot of chatter this week because there was some congressional testimony. We're not going to get into that.
Nope, we're not a politics podcast.
We're not a politics podcast. But hey, I enjoyed hanging out with you today, talking about
happened.
What?
We just had politics. That was the election. It's crazy that we're on the next election this year.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
already here.
Yeah, wow.
Yep.
Time
Wow,
flies.
time flies. And you are going to be
Oh,
a
yeah.
senior.
A senior, and I'll be able to vote. And there's a lot of things. I'll be an adult this year. That's kind of scary.
That's
I don't feel ready to be an adult. I'm ready. This is a little fun fact with Eva, or wisdom. I don't know what you want to call it. Your entire childhood, you're living from birthday to birthday because that's the biggest event in your life. And then as you get older, you live from, holiday to holiday and month to month and week to week and day to day. And that's why the years seem like they go faster, because you're not wishing for something so far off. And so as a kid, I wanted to be an adult. And now as 6 months, really, we are legitimately 6 months away from me being an adult. I'm like, I want to be 5 again. I want my biggest worry in the world to be what I'm having for a snack and how late I get to stay up that night.
right.
Like that, it's such a weird thing. And so just don't wish away what you don't have.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
Don't.
gonna miss the moments.
Yeah, we used to say, don't wish your life away. And that's a great way to put it. Somebody, a lot of people still, even my age, people are looking for the next thing.
Yep.
They're looking for the next vacation. They're looking for the next job. They're looking for
business
the next
opportunity.
Yes. And all of that is fine. But if we don't put it in proper perspective, we miss the moment and we miss the day. And so the moment that I just had was hanging out with one of my favorite people. So let's always be able to talk
from generation to generation.
Hey, if you enjoyed our episode, make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review because it helps people who don't know about us hear our message. And if you want to follow us on our socials, follow us at G2G_podcast on Instagram and Veneration to Generation to Facebook.